Okay, hello everyone and welcome to the Friday show. My name is Christian Sasse. I'm the host of SassePhoto YouTube channel, and whilst we're waiting, I'm just making sure the audio's working and everything's fine. I can see the chat is live and I also see our guest Karla Bloem, which I will introduce shortly, in the background. So everything's set. It's going to be very exciting tonight. Going to be very special because we'll be talking especially about owls and only about owls. Audio is good. I got good feedback. Okay, so we got a little bit over 2 minutes and then we'll go live. So I'll talk to you soon. Hello everyone and good evening. It's Friday again. It's been a few weeks now. I've been in Australia, now I'm back again, and I do hope that you were able to see our raptor and eagle news on Wednesday. We had so many hatches and exciting news in spring. So tonight's topic is going to be something very unique. We're going to have Karla Bloem, and she's from the International Owl Center, talking all about owls and educating us about owls. And why that is so unique, I'll let you know in a moment. But first, I would just like to jump to some updates on eagle news. So let's just see if I can get this in. Yes, there we go. So this is from Lady Hawk. So what has been happening at the Big Bear camera? You may know that there has been lots of drama already in California. So Stormy accidentally fell out of the nest. This has got a lot of views yesterday. That happened yesterday morning, I think around between 6 and 7 a.m. Pacific time. Just look at the live view in the nest, and you should be seeing that during flapping, Stormy falls out of the nest. So that should be coming in a moment. And you can see there's no wind as far as I can tell. Going right to the edge now. And just against the sun, so it's a little bit difficult to see, but take a careful look at the, yeah, there you can see starting to flap the wings, and off down the bird went. So that obviously was an accident. And let me just quickly go to the, let's see if I can find my files here. Yes, I should be able to. Here we are. So Lady Hawk then gave me some very nice images as an update. And you can see that is the park ranger looking for Stormy. And those are the parents. And if you look at the lower bottom screen there, I'm going to zoom in a little bit as much as I can. Lower right, you can see a yellow circle. That is that was the location. I think it's about 20 feet below the nest. So that is where Stormy landed and has been there ever since. So what has happened in the meantime? Just let's go back to the other screen. So what has happened in the meantime is that's what happened also yesterday. You can hear some squeaks below the nest. So do look at her. Yeah, Stormy squeaks heard below the nest on the 26th. And the parents were trying to entice Stormy to come up again, and very often they are able to climb up the trunk of the tree again. I'm sure you've seen this before, so that might happen. In other cases, what happens is very often the parents, especially when it's one eagle, will go down and try and feed it lower. So I'm not exactly sure what has happened, but the latest I got just about half an hour ago from Lady Hawk is Dad tries to entice Stormy to nest. Obviously, yes. So you could see it's mainly vocal, of course, because we don't have a camera that looks below, but they have been communicating, and what I've understood is that they obviously know where Stormy is, and they've been trying to entice Stormy to come right back to the nest. So do have a look at Lady Hawk's channel, and she as usual, in meticulous detail comments on this. Dad brought a fish to the nest a few minutes ago before this footage begins and flew off again. Stormy is heard squeaking in the opening seconds of the video and is still below the nest, closely to the lower right of the side cam 216. Well, let's do that. You will see him fly by the 5 o'clock position. Let's just jump in there and have a quick look there. Let's see if we can get that moment. Yeah, I think we just missed it. Let me just go again to 216. Must be about here. Yeah, you can see him at the 5 o'clock. Very difficult to see, but you can see him at the lower, just about 20-30 feet below the nest, flying around. So thank you very much, Lady Hawk. Oh, there he is back in the nest again. So we'll be keeping you up to date, so don't miss our news next Wednesday. And we have lots of updates then. So now I'm going to jump right to Karla Bloem. So here we are. Hello, Carla. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well. Well, Carla, it's an absolute delight to have you here. I've been talking to Carla yesterday already, and we had a very animated discussion. Well, first of all, I learned when I heard that Karla Bloem is in Houston, I had to be corrected straight away because, you know, the way I think is Houston is in Texas. But Carla, where is Houston actually? Your Houston?
Our Houston is way in the southeast corner of Minnesota, kind of down in the toe of Minnesota.
Well, that was news to me, and as many other things, my my jaw dropped as she was educating me more and more about owls. So, Carla, I mean, you have a fascinating history. Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, what is this lovely owl that you're holding there? Who is that? And also, give us a little bit about your history, please.
I'm holding Piper, the American barn owl. And Piper's 2 years old. She's been with us ever since she was 7 weeks old. So she was hatched in New York as part of a previous breeding and reintroduction program over there. And it was to the point where the young were no longer allowed to be released, so they had to be placed in captivity. So she works as an education bird, but because she's been raised by humans, she's a human imprint. And she spends most of her time with me, more so than the other staff, so she thinks I'm her mate. And she's a little bit high-strung, but she's being quite mellow right now, so that's a good thing.
Yes, and owls are not owls, of course. I mean, this is obvious to you, but not so obvious to me and to many others. So what is different about a barn owl as compared to a great horned owl, which we're going to talk about later?
Well, she's going to poop first. There we go.
That's special, yes.
All owls poop. Nice thing about owl poop, though, versus eagle poop is owls poop pretty much straight down, whereas eagles shoot it out. So when you have a bird in a building, it's much nicer to have an owl in a building than an eagle in a building when it comes to the poop. Owls are extremely diverse. So Piper is a barn owl. She's part of the Titanidae family. And there's not that many species in the Titanidae, but they all basically look like this. Some of them might be darker. Stay put, Piper. She's thinking about trying to fly. Some of them might be sootier looking, but they all basically look like this. And then you have the Strigidae, which is all the other owls on the planet, which is what most of the owl species are in the world. You hear her cheeping a little bit. She's quite vocal as a human imprint. She talks quite a bit. But yeah, so barn owls have brown eyes. There we go. Most of the owls that we have in North America have yellow eyes. We don't have any with orange eyes. There are a few others that would have brown eyes, like barred owls, spotted owls, and flammulated owls. And there's a few aberrant burrowing owls that have discolored eyes that might be dark. But barn owls and barred, you have to enunciate, both have dark eyes.
Very good. And Carla, I mean, you have an interesting history. How did you get into the whole, how did you get into owls? What is the fascination about owls, and what is so special about the International Owl Center?
I was always interested in birds of prey, more hawks than owls, because I grew up on a farm and my job was raking hay, so the red-tailed hawks would follow me around as I was raking hay because I was scaring up things that they could eat. At some point in time, we may have to send Piper back outside again. I don't think she'll have the patience for this whole thing.
Right, of course, that's fine.
I was in 4-H, so I was very involved in wildlife projects. And when I went to college, I studied biology and worked under an ornithologist. And birds of prey were really my passion. And I met a falconer who was also a wildlife rehabilitator when I was in college. So after I graduated, then I became a falconer for a couple of years. It's okay, Piper. And I flew kestrels. I started in 96, and right around that same time, the city of Houston, which Houston, Minnesota is a little bit smaller than Houston, Texas. It only has 979 people in it. We had spent about 10 years working to get the Root River Bike Trail to come to Houston, because tourism is a very important part of the future of a small town in southeast Minnesota. And we needed to have something to function as a trailhead. And the community group got together that was planning it and said, well, hey, we want to have a nature center, because nature is the main reason people come to southeast Minnesota. It's very, very biologically diverse. The Blufflands region where we live, it's very dissected with river valleys, heavily wooded bluffs. We have 3% of the state's area, and we have over 40% of the state's rare species. So nature is a big thing, and that's why people come. So we had decided to do a nature center along the bike trail for our trailhead. And when I talked to other nature centers as we were planning it, they said, start doing programming before you have your buildings. That way you can build support, awareness, and fundraise for the actual building. And people were interested in me doing birds of prey programs because I had kestrels for falconry, but they were good falconry birds, not necessarily education birds. So I thought, well, let's get a non-releasable education bird, and Alice the great horned owl is who happened to be available. She had fallen out of her nest at 503 Hogan Street in Antigo, Wisconsin in 1997, and she permanently injured her left wing. And because of that, they knew she'd never be able to fly. So they did what they could for her wing, but socialized her with humans, because they knew to stay alive, basically she'd have to get a job as an education bird, and socializing her at a young age would make her a better education bird. So I got her when she was, I think, 1.5 years old in 1998, and Alice started the whole owl thing from there. We started doing programs in 1998. The Houston Nature Center was built in 2001. So by then, Alice was kind of the star of the show and what everybody knew of the Nature Center. Piper. And once the Nature Center did open, though, it's about tourism as well as environmental education. And I thought, well, how should I bring tourism and environmental education together? And I thought, well, everybody likes Alice. She hatched sometime in early March, because that's when great horned owls in this area hatch. There's nothing going on in southeast Minnesota in early March because we're still in the end of winter and weather can be whatever. And I thought, well, let's do a hatch day party for Alice, and we'll bring in some live owls and do some fun family things. And the first year we had 300 people. Now, for a town our size in a very rural area, that's a lot. So we thought, let's build on this. So we kept doing it every year. And it just grew. We added a World Owl Hall of Fame to present awards to amazing people and owls who are doing great things to make the world a better place for owls. And then they started coming from all over the world to receive their awards and speak at the festival. But we also started having people fly in from all over North America. I mean, people were flying from Alabama, California, New York to little bitty Houston, Minnesota for our owl festival. And we thought, why are you coming to Houston, Minnesota this time of year? This is crazy. And then we realized we were the only full weekend all owl festival in North America. So then we just built on it, and when we started getting over 1,000 people a year coming, then we decided, okay, you know, there's an eagle center, a wolf center, a bear center, a crane center. There's no owl center that's dedicated to teaching people about owls in the United States, so let's start an owl center. So we started the International Owl Center 3 years ago in conjunction with the festival. And I think I'm going to put Piper in her box because she's had enough of sitting here. So if you'll excuse me for just about 30 seconds, I'll be right back.
Sure, that's fine. I'll just switch over quickly. Well, thanks a lot, Carla. So you could see what a special person Carla is. So in the meantime, I just want to introduce you all, say hi to all my guests. So if you don't know me, my name is Christian Sasse. I run SassePhoto together with my volunteers who are all there in the chat. And thank you, by the way, to RJ, who's just donated some money. I think that's really wonderful. That's very generous, and it keeps us going. So that's great. Just to give you a little bit of updates on owls whilst Carla's gone. She'll be back in a second. Do ask questions. So what we're going to do is we want to involve you. I'm going to be the moderator. I'm going to hold back. I'll give 2 or 3 questions in the beginning, and then please take over. You will be astounded what you're going to learn about owls. I can tell you that now. There are so many wrong facts about owls because we haven't studied them correctly, or because we've heard something hearsay and we put them down as facts. The same as eagles, where we're always correcting it's not a 35 incubation period, it's maybe closer to 37, 38 days, and so on and so on. So the more we study. So do bombard Carla with questions, please, and do pay attention, because we're going to have some dialing in to do where you can win some pictures again. So we're going to go back on the live phone. Hopefully it'll work. Sometimes the audio is not as good as it could be, so we'll try and improvise as much as possible. But I'm going to hand it right back to Carla now. And the first question I'm going to ask her seems a rather obvious one, so I'm just going to jump back, Carla. So my question to you is, you know, what I always thought is owls can turn their heads 270 degrees, right?
This is one of my pet peeve questions, because everything you read is going to say an owl can turn its head 270 degrees. Well, first off, what does that even mean? They mean starting from the front, they can turn their head to the side, to the back, and all the way over their other shoulder. So from the front, it goes 270 degrees, 3/4 of the way around. Now, I've worked with great horned owls for 20 years. I have never seen a great horned owl turn its head 3/4 of the way around. So you think I would have seen that if that was possible. And in all the other owls I had worked with also, I've never seen one turn its head 270 degrees. Then one of our World Owl Hall of Fame award winners once said to me, "Have you ever seen an owl turn its head 270 degrees? I've never seen an owl turn its head 270 degrees. I said, "No, I haven't." So I started emailing people, you know, high-end biologists who've been doing owls their whole life, and rehabilitators and educators. And almost all of them said, "We've never seen an owl turn its head 270 degrees. There were 2 educators that had education birds, and one was a barn owl. I think the other one was a long-eared owl, but I don't remember, that had, in certain circumstances, been able to have their education birds demonstrate turning 270 degrees. So I started working with some dead specimens, because people turn in dead owls to us. Some of them we use for mounted specimens, some for hands-on specimens, and some we use in dissections. And I thought, let's check on the dead ones. Okay, the dead ones probably can turn farther than live ones, which was obvious. But the great horned owl heads physically won't go 270 degrees from the front. So clearly, it's not the same for all owls. It's not something they commonly do. It's probably the equivalent of saying humans can stand with their heels together and their toes pointing in opposite directions. Well, there's probably some people that can't do that. And most of us wouldn't do that unless you were in really extenuating circumstances. So the whole turning their heads 270 degrees is not a normal thing, and probably a good chunk of owls can't even do it.
Well, well, you could see that Carla, which I really like, has a very scientific approach. That's exactly the way. She doesn't just accept things, she looks at things. So she examined a dead owl and tried to see what is actually possible. And that's what is so interesting about this. So, Carla, the questions are now pouring in. So let me start here with question number 1 from Glenn Hazelwoody. What is the life expectancy of a barn owl? And then question number 2, I'll just put it on straight away, is from Jackie Porter. Why do all owls always seem to bother eagles?
Okay, well, life expectancy of a barn owl we'll start with. And unfortunately, life expectancy in the wild for a barn owl is pretty short. Barn owls are kind of the rabbits of the owl world. They reproduce quickly. If you have really ideal conditions in a warmer climate, you can have barn owls having 3 clutches of babies per year. And in the United States, that might be up to 7 babies in each clutch. They don't have as good a hatching success as some other species, and they have very high mortality, because if all these birds lived, we would be totally overrun with barn owls. So unfortunately, they get killed by a lot of things. They die really easily because they have a very high metabolism. So if you have 3 days of rain or bad weather, they start starving to death. Our barn owl, even though she weighs, a pound and a quarter, eats as much food as our Eurasian eagle owl that weighs 6 pounds. Actually, she eats more right now. So very high metabolism. So unfortunately, barn owls in the wild probably have a life expectancy of 1 or 2 years. Although in captivity, they're capable of getting over 10 years. And I think I've heard of them up to even maybe 18 years in captivity. And what was the other question? I go on.
The other question was, why do owls always seem to bother eagles?
Oh, owls don't always bother eagles, but...
I know, this is very biased, so don't take it. I'm quite sure it is.
Yeah, so owls, not very good in the nest building department. Pretty much they don't build nests. So great horned owls, along with other owls, just use what's available. And for a great horned owl, a bald eagle nest is one of the things they consider for nesting. And bald eagles and great horned owls are nesting kind of around the same time. Usually the great horns are in there first. So sometimes they can successfully steal them. But on some cams, like the Decorah cam, there's been a barred owl, not a great horned owl, a barred owl that came in and slammed the back of the female when she was on the eggs. Why? I have absolutely no idea. Because that barred owl was not going to nest in that nest. It wasn't going to fight the eagle. What was it even trying to do? Was it just being obnoxious? I have no idea. So I think the one thing that I've learned over the years of observing wild owls, they all have different personalities. Some are really aggressive. Some are really mild. A whole bunch are kind of somewhere in the middle. So what one bird does might not be normal for all of them, and it's probably the obnoxious ones that happen to be pestering the eagles.
Very good. And Sasha68, as Nicole was wondering, what is the nesting season for the barn owl?
For the barn owl?
Yes, barn owl. Yes.
Barn owls can nest almost whenever. So I'm more familiar with what's going on in the Midwest. And we don't have many barn owls here. They've actually, since like the mid-60s or so, they've disappeared. But Iowa has been working really hard with nest box programs, and they had unbelievable breeding this past year. And in Iowa, they had 1 clutch last year that was going to hatch in December, which is ridiculous. Why would you be having babies in December in Iowa? Not a really good idea. But then, of course, they can be nesting very early also. So they're capable of nesting almost year-round. Not that it's a great idea, but they're capable of it.
And the other question from Carrie Miller says, She says, I was wondering if anyone tried articulating a dead owl skeleton that far, obviously turning about the neck rotation. Thanks for doing the physical trial, Carla.
I have an articulated spotted owl skeleton, but I think it's got a wire up through the neck. I don't think I'd be able to turn it. And I think an articulated one would go farther than one in real life would, because a real live one is going to have the muscles and the blood vessels and everything else that's restricting motion even more than the bones are.
Very good. And here from Nicole, what is a good way to help barn owls?
Nest boxes are fantastic for barn owls. Depending on where you are, like in our area, they like old silos, grain bins that aren't being used, abandoned buildings. But in warmer, like in California, you can just put them up in your yard. They can be very urban birds. So in some places, they don't mind being around people. Here, they kind of mind being around people, but in some urban places, they don't mind. But a huge thing that everybody can do to help owls, not just barn owls, but all owls, but very specifically barn owls also, is don't use rodenticides. Find other methods of dealing with rodents. So get rid of the garbage outside. Make sure you don't have ivy growing around the base or cracks in your foundation that they're coming in. Seal that stuff off. So take care of the exclusion first. And then when you're dealing with them, whether you're using live traps, snap traps, don't use glue traps because other things get stuck on those. But the rodenticides, really avoid using rodenticides. They are formulated very specifically so that mice are not going to die after one day. Because a mouse is smart, and a rat also for that matter, if they eat enough one day, not to kill them, but enough to make them sick, they're never going to touch it again. So they purposely formulate it so they're not going to die for 4 or 5 days. If you read the box of poison, it's going to tell you first dead mice will appear 4 to 5 days after feeding begins. And that's because they want them to just continue to eat and eat and eat and eat. And in the meantime, they're going to start bleeding internally because that's how the poisons work, the majority of them anyway. There's a few that are neurotoxins, but most out there are anticoagulants. So they'll start bleeding internally. That makes them thirsty. And they do that because they want the mice to leave your house, because who wants dead mice stinking in your walls? So when they get thirsty, they try and get out of your house or your other buildings in search of water. So they got in, they can get back out again. Well, by then they're dying, and they're easy prey, much easier prey than healthy animals are. So owls and hawks are both eating those poison mice. Now, if you're something like a great horned owl, one poison mouse probably won't kill you, but the half-life in their body is about a year. So it stays in there for a very long time. Barn owls are smaller. It's going to affect them more than a larger species, but those rodenticides are pretty significant. They've started doing some studies to see how many wild owls have measurable levels of rodenticides in their body, and it's horrifying. It's not like 5% or 10%. Almost all the studies they've done, and they're looking at generalist predators like barn owls, barred owls, great horned owls, red-tailed hawks, things like that. Almost all of them are finding at least 60% have measurable levels of at least one, and very often more than one rodenticide in their body. A lot of them are finding up to 80%, and some of them have even found up to 100% of the birds that are carrying rodenticide load in their body. So something huge that we all can do is use other methods of rodent control. And the fun thing is we have the power as consumers to take care of this. The poison manufacturers, as long as people are buying it, they're going to keep making it. And they're going to be putting pressure on the EPA to allow them to be able to do things. But we, as consumers, have the power. And if none of us are buying it, we just solve the problem from the bottom up. So that's a huge thing to help barn owls and other owls and hawks. And also in the same vein, it also prevents you from poisoning your cat, dog, and kids also, because they're also victims of poison. Because really, rodenticides are not rodent poison. They're just poison. Anything that eats them is going to be poisoned, not just mice and rats.
Well, Carla, that was incredibly educational. I find that really astounding. I mean, I must say, I never thought about this. What you said about rodenticizing, it makes complete sense, of course. Once you hear it, you say, oh my goodness. You know, the way we think is, oh, there's a horrible rat or mouse in the house, let's get rid of it. And that's where the pesticides come in. But as much as we have lead poisoning with eagles and raptors, now we have you have exactly the problem with owls that can get very poisoned. So thank you for alluding to this. Now we're only 10 questions behind, so it's not bad, you know. So questions are pouring in. Thank you all. You are all going to get your chance for the questions. So thank you for just bombarding Carla with questions. So let's go to Pacific Northwest Kate. She's been on our show before, visiting here. She's a fantastic wildlife photographer. And I think it's also Gentleman Ghost asking, would they have several clutches a year? I'm not sure what they refers to. Maybe it's to barn owls because it's been some time, but maybe you can just comment on that, Carla, please.
Mm-hmm. Barn owls, if the situation is appropriate, they will have more than one clutch per year. Usually in the north they don't, but in warmer places like California, they can do 2 or 3 clutches. 3 is a little unusual, 2 would be a little more normal. But most of the other owl species are going to be 1 per year.
Very good. And Carrie Miller asks, barn owls are plentiful in Northern California. Were they locally in decline where you first explained about the release of captive bred owls?
So along California and in the warmer places, they've done fine. Barn owls, just, if you remember when Piper was standing here, you really saw her legs, long, spindly legs. You don't see that on other owls. Other owls are really well feathered, and you usually see just their toes peeking out underneath their feathers. They're really well insulated. Barn owls are not, so they haven't done well in the more northern and colder parts of their climate. So the Midwest all the way across to the northeastern United States, from the mid-60s or so on, they just kind of disappeared. And nobody's exactly sure why. It probably has to do with a change in farming methods, because everybody used to have a big red barn. Everybody had a few cows, pigs, horses, whatever. So if you're a barn owl, you could go into that big red barn in the winter, and you got that supplemental heat from the livestock in the barn. If you had livestock, you also had grain to feed them. And if you had grain, then of course you had rodents for the barn owls to eat. And at that time also, if you had livestock, you had pasture for your livestock. Barn owls like to hunt over open areas, open short grassy areas, flying back and forth, whereas many owl species are perch and pounce, like we think of great horns, barred owls, screech owls. They just sit on a perch, wait for something to run by, and they fly down and grab it. Barn owls go back and forth over short grass areas. It doesn't work over corn and beans like what most of the Midwest is these days. Now there's getting to be more CRP and restoration programs and things like that, and that might be why they're coming back, but it's not really well understood why they disappeared, because there were reintroduction programs in Wisconsin that didn't increase the population. Iowa tried it. It didn't increase their population. There's a nonprofit in Missouri that's on and off done it with some success. The one in New York has had some success. So it's just kind of been a mixed bag, and we don't really know exactly what's going on.
Very interesting. And I'll bombard you with 2 questions at once. Nicole is asking, what should I do if I find one of the owlets on the ground? That's one question. And then Gentleman Ghost from New York, I know him very well. He's always on the show. Curious if owls will abandon nests if there's human interference in the nest. Is this across all nature in the bird world? And he's obviously talking about eagles and so. So maybe these 2 questions. So again, the owlet on the ground, what do I do? And what happens with human interference with the owls?
Okay, the owlet on the ground. Excellent question, and very timely, because this is the time of year when young owls wind up on the ground. So it's not uncommon at all for owls to fall out of the nest or leave the nest before they're flying well. And they're kind of designed so that if they fall out of the nest too early to be out of the nest, if they're somewhat old, I mean anything more than a nestling, they usually will go over to a sloping tree and climb back up someplace a little bit safer and get themselves off the ground. But when they leave the nest, when they're fledging, almost everybody would say, whoa, this owlet's too young to be out of the nest because its head's all fuzzy, its body's all fuzzy, and it's not flying very good. So they think these birds need help. But the thing to do is look at their wing feathers. If their wing feathers are fully grown, even if their head is all fuzzy and their body's all fuzzy, they're a fledgling, they're supposed to be out of the nest, and you just leave them alone. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's a vulnerable part of their life, but mom and dad are there watching and taking care of them. So if they're a nestling, if they don't have full-grown wing feathers yet, they're too young to be out of the nest on their own. So one of the things you can do if they're quite young and you can't get them, I mean, the ideal is to get them way back up into the nest. Very often that's not possible. But if you can make a basket nest and put up in the tree as high as you can get it, mom and dad will usually come and take care of it also. So that is often done to help take care of them. But baby owls on the ground usually don't need help. So that was a very good question, and this is the time of year when people call us all the time. I found a baby owl, what do we do? Or can I pick it up? Or they just pick it up and bring it, and we have to say, go put it back. There's nothing wrong with it. It's supposed to be doing that. And the other question was
about the human interference in owls.
Okay. It depends on the species. Some owls are more susceptible than other owls to interference. And it depends on what stage of nesting it's at. Eurasian eagle owls in Europe and Asia, that's where they live, like to nest very often on cliff faces where you have a rock face and where the scray kind of meets the rock face. Very often they nest right there. They're very vulnerable to disturbance from rock climbers, and they desert their nests very easily. So Eurasian eagle owls are very, very sensitive to disturbance. Great horned owls probably less so, but there have been instances of, okay, usually when you've got a great horned owl cam going on, it was already an eagle cam and the great horned owls moved in, or it was an osprey cam and the great horned owls moved in. Or like in Oklahoma City, it's on somebody's balcony and they're somewhat desensitized to humans. But it's not like you can just say, oh, look, there's great horned owls nesting. Let's get a cam up in that tree, because they could desert from the disturbance. So early on with eggs, they'd be more likely to desert. If they have young birds, they're a little bit less likely to desert. So it's kind of how much have they invested is going to play into their decision of should I desert or not. If they've invested a lot, they're less likely to desert than if they haven't invested as much.
So again, not a simple answer. It depends. You heard about the Eurasian owl, eagle owl, being much more sensitive and so on. So thank you. So now we move on. Let me see, where was the next question? Oh, this is an interesting, you'll love this, Carla, because we were discussing this yesterday. Question number 9 from Jackie Porter. By the way, we have, let me see, we're question 22. So we are question number 9, and we've got quite a few waiting. So just keep on pouring in with questions and do be patient, because Carla is taking a lot of time to give you a very elaborate answer, which is great. So question number 11, Jackie Porter. I'm in, no, where was it? Sorry. Yes, no, sorry. It was, gosh, it just jumped, my screen just jumped. 1 second. Jackie Porter, yes. What is the strength of an owl's talon? We had this yesterday.
Good question. So there's numbers that get thrown around out there. And I always say, how do you know their grip strength or the PSI at the tips of their talons? I want to know how they tested that. So I went and looked in the scientific literature, and I only found one actual study that looked at a few owl species and gave grip strength. But I kind of threw it out the window because the methodology was they had, one of those squeeze meter things, whatever they're called, in the perch. So when the bird squeezed, it would give the grip strength. But the way they got the birds to grip the perch was they pushed on their chest to try and push them backwards off the perch, and then they had to grab. Well, I don't think that's as hard as an owl can grab by any stretch of the imagination. When a bird really wants to do this, that's much more than they're going to do when they're just grabbing to hold on to a perch. So I don't really buy those numbers. So basically, in my mind, I won't even give a number for grip strength. I can tell you they can grab hard enough through a leather glove to give you a nice bruise. I've got examples of that going on, thanks to Alice. She was a little crabby the other day. There's a reason for the word owlie, and it's female great horned owls. I've done some searching on the internet also to look at grip strength, and over in the UK things are different because you can just have an owl as a pet, or many other raptors. So a lot of people have birds from all over the world there. So there's a lot of diversity, a lot of people keeping birds there. And many of them were comparing the grip strength of a great horned owl upwards of eagles. So a great horned owl is much more a stronger grip strength than a Eurasian eagle owl, even though a Eurasian eagle owl is much bigger. So it's playing with the big boys. I mean, they're rivaling or worse than eagles from what I've seen from other people who have handled them both.
So very interesting. There's no definitive quantitative answer here. That is, I think, a very important conclusion. So please be careful when you read about these conclusions, because Carla pointed out very well, how do you really want to measure this, and at what point are you measuring this?
Yeah, and are you measuring at the tip of the talon?
Right.
Are you measuring the overall grip strength? And somebody maybe has done it, and I just haven't seen it. I haven't found it in the scientific literature. If anybody has seen any published data and the methodology that goes with it, I would love to see it.
Yes, and question number 10, so we are only about 14, 15 behind, so it's okay. From Alatrack Tracy, how many are in a clutch typically for barn owls?
Barn owls are going to vary, and I think in the United States they say typically 4 to 7. But if you go to Europe, well, it might be up to 15. But the more recent research that's just come out very recently is saying that the barn owls that are in Europe and Africa are a different species than the one we have in the Americas, which is a different species than they have in Australia. Right now they say it's all one species, it's all over the world, although vocalizations are different, size is different, and clutch size is different also. So it depends on what you're considering great horned or barn owls to be. But in the United States, typically we're going to be looking at 4 to 7.
And another question from Jackie Porter. I live in rural Nova Scotia. Is there something I can do to attract owls in my area?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, there's an Owls and Humans section, and one is how to live an owl-friendly life. So we already talked about not using rodenticides. Now that's not attracting them, but one of the things you can do to attract them, if you live in the country, mow less lawn. I live out in the country, and when I moved here, there was a huge mowed lawn, so I mowed it. And after a few years, I went, why am I mowing all this lawn? I don't ever use that part of the lawn for anything. So I stopped mowing it, and it just went wild. Well, guess what? When it goes wild, there's all kinds of critters that move in there that owls like to eat. And then another section I just stopped mowing. So we have all kinds of critters now in the yard. A huge, vast mowed lawn is kind of a biological desert. There's things that go across it, but not a whole lot lives in it. Now, if you live in the city, you can't just say, I'm not mowing my lawn because it has good wildlife value. They're still probably going to find you. But you can landscape with native plants. It's a lot more labor intensive to get that landscaping in and to keep it weeded than to just mow a lawn. But it's going to look nicer, and it's going to support more wild animals that the owls can eat. Depending on where you are and what species you have, you may be able to put up an owl nest box to encourage them to nest. If you live out in the country where it's safe to do so, if you have a big dead tree, leave it standing. Everybody knows that live trees are important for owls. Most people don't realize the dead ones are really important, because if you're a barred owl, a screech owl, a saw-whet owl, a boreal owl, and a lot of other owl species, these little guys, northern pygmy owls, well, and then there's some down in the southwest that you wouldn't have. They're dependent on tree cavities, and that's going to be a dead or a dying tree. So leaving dead trees standing when it's safe to do that is really, really important for owls and for other species like red-headed woodpeckers. Taking down unused soccer nets is important because owls get stuck in there. That doesn't really attract, it just helps prevent them from being injured. But look on our website and you'll find a long list of things, kind of do's and don'ts to live an owl-friendly life.
Well, so much for lawns. I love this. And biological deserts. I'll remember that phrase, biological deserts. What a wonderful phrase. And here's the call again. How far should nest boxes be placed apart?
Spacing of nest boxes depends on the species. So if you're dealing with a smaller species like a screech owl, they can be closer than, say, a barred owl because they're going to have bigger territories. Now, that being said, you might happen to be able to get birds that have a territorial boundary, and this one's okay with having a nest at its edge, and this one's okay here. It's probably not the ideal. But putting up more than one nest box is always a nice idea also. We have multiple nest boxes on our property, knowing full well that we're not going to get screech owls nesting in each one of those boxes, but it gives them options. And female owls like to have options. They like to shop around and say, oh, well, I like the one that faces to the southeast, or, oh, I like the exposure here, or there's nice little branches here. So I always encourage to put up multiple boxes so that owls have more choice, even though you're probably not going to get a ton, multiples nesting in a small area. But, you know, as far as how big a territory is, it's going to vary with habitat. So if you've got really rich habitat with a lot of prey in it, the owls are going to have a smaller territory than if you have more of an arid environment and there's less prey for them to eat, then they're going to have a larger territory. But certainly for the large species, a mile apart is plenty of spacing, and less than that probably works. Smaller species like screech owls, probably half a mile apart, you could get individual pairs, just kind of ballparking it.
Very good. And now comes Sherry Matthias. This is another question, Carla, we discussed yesterday, and it probably should be there should be a second question to this. What makes the owl able to fly without any sound? So I know you're going to say, well, we have to be more specific here, but please go ahead.
Okay. When it comes to silent flight in owls, first I'll preface that with not all owls fly silently. Because if you're a fish owl and you eat fish, the fish don't hear you and you don't hear the fish. So they don't have well-developed facial discs. They don't fly silently. If you're an owl that eats insects, you're not doing it by hearing. They don't have the silent flight adaptations. The small mammal specialists tend to be really good with their silent flight. And typically it's more the glide that's silent and the flap makes some noise. If you watch our great horned owl cams, you hear the birds flying back and forth. When they're flapping, it's easy to hear the flap. The glide, you don't hear. So that's just a little preface on that. Now, how do they do this quiet stuff? There are three main things that owls have for the silent flight adaptations. The first is on the leading edge of their wing. They have on the first one and maybe two feathers, they have these little serrations that come out that looks like the edge of a comb sticking out of the leading edge of their wing. And I'm not a physicist, but basically what I understand that does is it changes how the air flows over the wing, and it makes it more of a smooth flow rather than a turbulent flow, so it makes less noise as the wing is cutting into the wind. Then on the trailing edge of the wing back here, the edges of the feathers are a little bit ragged. They don't zip together tightly, and that does the exact same thing. It allows the airflow to come together nicely without the turbulence, so it makes less noise again. And then the third thing is the top surface of the feathers, not the bottom, but the top surface of the feathers has a velvety pile on it, and that helps. It's like wearing a fleece jacket instead of a nylon jacket. You make less noise as you move around. So those are the three main ways that owls are quiet when they fly.
Very good. I think that's, as you say, for a physicist, this is what interests me. I'm a physicist, so this is something that I want to go in much more, is why they actually fly so silent, because it's absolutely incredible that's actually possible. You know, anything that engineers have built from a flying machine is nowhere close to what at least silent flying owls can do. That brings us to the next question from Dana Steele. Are they carrion eaters as well? Carrion eaters as well?
Good question. Most owls like to kill their own food. Like, I never like to use the word all, but as far as I'm aware, they like to kill their own food. I know great horned owls will scavenge, but that's typically if they're not able to catch enough of their own food. Like when I was in high school, there was a dead deer on the side of the road in winter, and every day for a week, there was a great horned owl sitting on it eating. Now that bird probably wasn't doing well otherwise because he was sitting there in broad daylight eating on the deer carcass. So some of them, if hard pressed, probably, but it's not their preference. They're going to prefer killing their own food fresh.
Yes, a gentleman goes with a very interesting question also here about the hierarchy of owls. Is there a specific owl that is like an alpha predator of the owls?
Generally, big owls eat little owls, so that's what it boils down to. So if you're a Eurasian eagle owl, you're top, and you're going to be eating long-eared owls, barn owls, tawny owls, little owls. Yeah, if you're a great horned owl, you're going to eat maybe even other great horned owls, barred owls, screech owls, saw-whet owls, barn owls. Yeah, so big owls eat little owls. So the bigger you are, the more top of a predator you are.
Yeah, then I have to just jump in with a quick question. So what's the smallest owl?
Smallest owl in the world is the elf owl, which lives in the southwest U.S. And it's between 5 and 6 inches tall. It's ridiculously small. You look at it and say, how on earth can an owl be that little?
Good, good, good. Okay, next question. Glenn Hazelwoody QQ asks, do owls just eat rodents?
It depends on the species. Some species of owls really specialize on rodents, like barn owls really like to eat rodents a lot. I mean, they're great at rats, they're great at mice, voles, things like that. They really specialize on small mammals. Great gray owls, they love voles, so they're really into mammals. But there are fish owls that specialize on fish. They might eat some frogs also. If you're a great horned owl or a screech owl, you eat pretty much anything that moves that's in the right size range. So that can include worms, that can include insects, lizards, for a great horned owl, skunks, cats, frogs, snakes, mice, squirrels, turkeys, herons, small cats and dogs. So it depends on the species as to what they eat. So some of them eat just anything that moves.
And now Osprey Mama, friend of Ospreys, do they have problems with owls and lead poisoning? That's, I think, a good question because it's very common with eagles.
Very good question. Lead poisoning is not seen, I mean, it's very common in eagles. It's not that commonly seen in owls, and especially at clinical levels where you notice things going on. I have a rehabber friend in Illinois, and they had a lot of surplus lead testing kits. So they started testing kind of everything, not just the eagles, and they were finding lead in sparrows, in screech owls, in starlings, all kinds of stuff. And then you kind of go, where is that lead coming from? And the best thought is probably it's coming from the soil, from when we used to have lead in gasoline, and then all these, I mean, it's basically contaminated wherever you have a shooting range or wherever anyone shoots lead bullets, which is kind of anywhere, because that lead doesn't just magically disappear. It stays in the soil, and then you have worms that are digging around in the soil and ingesting part of that, and then, of course, the birds are eating the worms, and then other things are eating those. But it's not like eagles. Eagles' lead is a huge problem. And although it may show up in some owls, it's usually not at clinical levels that's causing problems.
Okay, now here comes an interesting one from KMS Ban RJ. I hope I got that correct. Found a decapitated rabbit in my raised bed garden, which was very freaky. I read owls do that. We have a very noisy barred owl. Would they eat the body, or do they return for it later? Why wouldn't they eat the body? Sorry, why wouldn't they eat the body, and would they return for it later? So, do they decapitate? Is that actually common?
Yeah, great horned owls are famous for you find a decapitated rabbit, a decapitated chicken, a decapitated whatever. That's usually a great horned owl that's doing that if you're finding decapitated animals laying around. And if you think about it, if you go out to a buffet and there's really great steaks or, your favorite foods on there, and then they have things that you don't like very much, like maybe Brussels sprouts or kale, or, I mean, I love those, but, assume that they have some things that you don't really like. If you went there every day, you're just going to eat the stuff you love every single day. And apparently the head's the best part. So if you don't have to, why would you go back and eat the rest of it? You just kill another one and eat the best part the next day. So they will go back if they're not catching something else and eat the rest of it. And sometimes they'll try and cache the body. But it's the best part. So if you're a good hunter, you can just eat the best part every day.
Well, that's a great answer. That brings me to question number 19 now. Kathy Newton, do you see any snowy owls in your area?
Occasionally we get snowy owls in the winter, not very frequently. If you're in northern Minnesota or like North Dakota, they get snowy owls every winter, and that's totally normal for them. They don't breed anywhere in the lower 48 states. They only breed above the tree line, so northern Canada and northern Alaska is where they breed. But they do come south in the winters, and how far south they come varies dramatically from year to year. I think the winter of 2013, they showed up in Florida, Jamaica, and Hawaii. There was one, I think, that spent the winter in Tennessee. So they can go really far south. And I think even this year there was one in Oklahoma, I think, and maybe another one over by St. Louis. We had some this last winter by La Crosse, Wisconsin for a few weeks. So it really varies from year to year. And if anybody tells you they know exactly what's going on, they don't know what they're talking about, because the guys that are doing the research on the breeding ground don't know exactly what's going on either.
Comes a really fascinating question from Warbies, and we discussed this yesterday too, Carla. She says, or he, whoever that is, sorry. Carla, could you explain how owls find food when there's 2 feet of snow on the ground?
It depends on what species of owl you are. If you're a barn owl, you're in trouble and you're probably not finding stuff to eat. If you're a great gray owl, absolutely no problem, because a great gray owl has such fantastic hearing. They can hear a vole under 2 solid feet of snow. They fly out over it and turn into a plunge dive and go straight first, head first, and at the last second pop their feet through and grab the vole that they never even saw. And I'm not sure if boreal owls can do that also. I think boreals have amazing hearing, so I think they can catch things without seeing them. I think hawk owls, some of them are more specialized on birds, so then they don't have to worry about it as much. So it really varies with species as to how they're going to do. If you're a great horned, big deal. Slow down your metabolism if you're not catching anything to eat. They could go a week or 2 without eating and not starve to death. So some of them have that luxury of slowing down their metabolism. Barn owls are not being one of those.
Incredible, isn't it? And question number 22 from Nicole Aaron Wagner. My daughter, age 7, loves owls. She would like to know how long it takes for an owl egg to hatch and the length of time from hatching until the baby is able to survive on its own.
Oh, that's going to vary entirely by species. So generally, the smaller the owl, the shorter the incubation period, and the shorter the time till they're independent of their parents and able to fly. The bigger the owl species, the longer the incubation period and the longer till they're independent from their parents. So generally you can say, let's start somewhere in the ballpark of a month, and the small ones are a little bit shorter than that, and the big ones are a little bit longer than that for incubation period.
Very good. And Terry Green. Hi, Carla. Are the snowy owls' migrations finished now? Are they ready to return since the weather is warming? Thank you.
Yeah, so with snowy owls, we call it not a migration, but an eruption, because it's not a regular north-south thing. Sometimes there's not many coming south. It's really a little bit unpredictable, so it's considered an eruption, not eruption like a volcano. It's IRRUPTION. And I think there's a few that are still not all the way back up there yet, if I remember from what I've seen. But generally, yeah, when the snow is leaving, they're going, okay, time to go north again.
Very interesting. That's the word eruption. That's a new word for me too. Thank you. Christy H. asked, can Carla show a wing feather and why owls fly silently? It's cool. So it's the same question again. You probably don't have any wing feathers around, but that's the question.
Are you kidding? I do, right over there in the living room.
Okay. Well, thank you. Just keep on pouring your questions. So it is really fantastic. Your questions are phenomenally good, and so so big in variety. So thanks for just being here and being so dedicated. We're very fortunate also to have Carla here. And thanks, of course, to Nicole for organizing all this. I have to say, really praise my team, for taking the initiative and making the shows just become more and more interesting. I'm just mentioning this whilst Carla is getting an owl feather. So I just have to ask you quickly, Carla, because eagle feathers are strictly prohibited in the United States, not so much in Canada, from being picked up. How is it with owl feathers, actually, whilst you are sorting this out?
Yeah, as you see, I have bags and bags and bags of feathers, because one of the things we do with all of our education birds is we keep the molted feathers, and then we label the date that they molted them, because in owls, they don't molt all their wing feathers every year. They molt some of them, so it takes a few years to replace them. So then we can see which feather was molted which year on which date, and then we can look at molt sequence and things like that. So yeah, and as far as protection, yeah, eagle feathers are horrendously protected in the United States. Not possible to have them even for education. But owl feathers, as long as we have salvage permits, we can keep those and use for education or research. Okay, so this is a P10. It's the outer primary of a great horned owl. Let me see if I can get it close enough that it, no, it's still there. Do you see that comb?
Very clear, beautiful.
Yeah, so that's the comb on the P10, the outer primary, that cuts the wind as they're flying. And then...
there we go. That's the secret. Thank you very much. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, and then let me find a feather that's in reasonably good shape. They like to play with them sometimes, so they're not always in good shape once we're able to pick them up. The back side of the feather, let's see if I can get that close enough. You see that it doesn't zip tightly together?
Yes, we could see that.
Yep, so that's the other part that keeps them very quiet. And let's see, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to show you the velvety pile on the top surface of the feather. Maybe. Can you see that there's some depth to that? It's not just flat?
Yes, I could see that. I can see that, yes.
Yeah, so it's a little bit fuzzy on the top surface. So those are the three things that show the quiet flight of owls.
Interesting. Well, thank you. That was absolutely marvelous. Well, I'm delighted that someone asked this question and you actually have owl feathers here. Great. Okay, so we'll jump to the next question from Nancy Haas. Going back to Carla's discussion about head rotation, couldn't the 270-degree rotation mean the total amount of rotation, not just to one side, but right and left added together?
So it could, but that's not what they mean. When they say 270, they mean from the front. That's what they're saying when they say 270. So an owl easily, all of them can go 270 if they start at this side, go to the front, to the side, and to the back. All owls very comfortably can go from the front directly to the back. So 180 from the front. So technically, can an owl turn its head all the way around? Absolutely, they all can. If the starting point is in the back, they can go 360 easily. So when people always say, can an owl turn its head all the way around? I'll ask people, what do you think? And if they say yes or if they say no, I was like, you're right. It just depends on what the starting point is.
And here's a very interesting question from Jan from VT. Do you find it unusual that great horned owls, ospreys and bald eagles would build their nests all within a quarter-mile range? The great horned owl nests right in the middle.
Wow. I would consider that somewhat unusual, but I've heard of barred owls and great horned owls within 100 feet of each other, and you'd normally say, wow, that seems crazy. But sometimes birds of prey don't hunt right around the immediate vicinity of their nest, so they're just going somewhere else to hunt. So yeah, I would consider it definitely unusual, but obviously not unheard of. Birds like to do things that we think are weird. They don't read the books that we write about them.
Very good answer. I love that. That's a great answer. They don't behave the way we think they should. And this is another one from Nicole. I think we had this yesterday, Carla, when we were talking. How many different types of owl species are there and where are they most located?
Ha 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 ha. At the International Festival of Owls, one year our keynote speaker gave a 1-hour presentation on the question, how many owl species are there in the world? Because nobody agrees. Anybody that says less than 200 is not correct. It's at least 200, no question. It may be as many as 275. It's probably at least 250, but we're still figuring things out, and DNA stuff is entering into it. But DNA work is not as straightforward as you think it would be. You would just say, oh, are they the same species or are they different? But then the question becomes, well, is a 2% separation enough for them to be a different species, or is it 1.7% for them to be a different species? It's not the same across the board. So somebody's drawing an arbitrary line there. And speciation doesn't just happen instantly and say, okay, they're getting different, okay, now they're different species. It's a gradual thing. So it's not as straightforward as you think it would be. So good luck trying to come up with an answer to that question. But it's somewhere in the 200s, probably at least 250, maybe more, maybe a little less.
Right, 200, 250 worldwide. What about North America?
Okay, North America, we have 19. Some people would say 20 if you count the mountain pygmy owl as its own species. And interestingly, the southern hemisphere has more owl species significantly than the northern hemisphere does.
Well, that's interesting. I just came back from Australia, so I'm going to keep my eyes open. I had no idea.
And Australia has very weird owls. A lot of theirs are Ninox species, so they don't have the big fat heads. They have more hawk-like looking heads.
Fascinating. Thank you, Carla. You're going to open my eyes for my next visit in June. That's great. So, proud cat mama of asks, let me just see if the sentence, 2 barn owls. Is it true that the supply of food dictates the number of eggs laid and the number of chicks that fledge? Well, that's we know from eagles, so that's probably where the parallel is coming from.
Mm-hmm. For some species, that's really what drives them. Like snowy owls, if there's not a lot of prey, they don't even bother to lay eggs. They just skip nesting that year, or they might only lay a very, very few eggs. If they've got good prey, then they lay a whole bunch of eggs, but then that prey abundance is going to determine how many of those babies are going to make it and how many are going to die. So snowy owls, very dependent on that. Barn owls are probably a little bit more dependent on that. I think great horns probably less dependent on that. So it depends on the species. Some are going to be much more subject to that and some less so.
And Ducky T, which is a really interesting question too. How do owls handle the loss of their mate?
Good question. Not a lot is known of mate replacement. We have seen some with the wild owls around here. Each individual great horned owl has a unique voice, so we've been able to track the wild ones in the area over the last 14 years to see what has happened. So we had Wendell and Wheezy were the first pair that I was listening to. When Wheezy died of West Nile virus, Victor and Virginia, the adjacent pair, just ran him off. That was it. Never heard from him again. Virginia and Victor and Virginia, when we found her on a sandbar with a slice in her pectoral muscle and maggots in it, sent her to the Raptor Center where she later died. Then Victor, there was another female over here, and she flirted with Victor a little bit and with another male over there and went back and forth, and she finally settled in with the other male. So Victor held that territory as a single male for a few years before he just kind of faded out of the picture. But then you have some owls where, okay, the female died and the males called in a new one within 2 weeks and whoop, they're right at it again. So it varies by individual birds, probably has something to do with the population in the area, and probably the virility of the surviving birds, I would guess. So
makes complete sense. And now comes Amanda here. Carla, obviously you love all owls, but what is your favorite species? And if you could choose one, why?
Well, my favorite species is definitely the great horned owl, because of Alice and because I've learned so much from her. But then I've always, the more you learn, the more you find out you don't know. So I just have so many more questions, and I'm around great horned owls the most because we have 7 captive ones here because of the research that we're doing on them. And I just find them absolutely fascinating, but they're the ones I know the best. And I kind of feel very familiar with great horned owls, so they're definitely my favorite.
Okay, very good. Now I just have to find my, 1 second. Oh yes, here we go. Lullaboo, yes, Lullaboo 2, often here on the show. Are all types of owlets born with their eyes closed?
Ah, okay. So this is the difference between altricial and precocial babies. So precocial ones are things like chicks and ducks and baby turkeys, and they get up and they hit the ground running and they're ready to go and they can see. Owls are altricial, so they're helpless. I mean, they dry off and they're a little bit fuzzy, but they really can't do anything. So as far as I'm aware, all of them that I know of are born with their eyes closed, and it takes a while before their eyes are opening, several days, if not a week or more.
Very good question. Christy H is asking, thank you, Carla. Can you grab a skeleton to show the offset of the ear holes and why owls have such great hearing?
I don't have a skull here at home, except for an intact one inside a bird in the freezer. At the Owl Center, I do have a collection of skulls. So most, you always hear about the asymmetry in owl ears. Some owls do not have asymmetrical ears. Like great horned owls are not asymmetrical in any way, shape, or form. Most of the asymmetry in owl ears is in the external ear, in the soft tissue. It's not in the skull. There's only a few owls that I'm aware of that have asymmetry in the skull. So that would be boreal owls and saw-whet owls, where the skull itself, the ear bulb on one side's down low and aimed down, and the other one is up high and kind of aimed a little bit in the opposite direction. So hopefully that helps show you a little bit. But if you come to the Owl Center, I can show you.
Very nice. Gentleman Ghost again. I may have missed this, but do owls attack other birds in flight? Flying skills, how are their flying skills in comparison to other birds of prey?
That's going to vary by species. So a lot of owls are not the quick, agile flyers, but some of them are. I mean, some of the little ones that eat insects, things like, then you get into pygmy owls. Pygmy owls are little, but they are ferocious, and they can kill birds 2 or 3 times their size. Now, I honestly don't know if they're taking them in flight, and they're diurnal also. I mean, we always think of owls being nocturnal. Nope, pygmy owls are diurnal. You want to see a northern pygmy owl, you have to go out during the day because they go to sleep at night. So I would assume they probably can catch them in flight because those are agile little things, and they have Napoleon complexes. They think they're huge, and they'll kill things 2 or 3 times their size.
Very good. And there's a comment here for me from Christy H. Christian, maybe you can take a microscopic photo of a bird feather and post it. They are gorgeous. Well, absolutely, I can do that. We can do a live show. I think what would make even more sense is if I can get David Hancock and possibly another really bird feather expert so that we could really enjoy it, not just look at the photograph, but learn a lot from it. So I think that's something to go on a future show, and I can definitely show this in great magnification. So yes, that is noted. Thank you. And question number 34 from Amanda. How many feathers do the average owl have?
Oh, this is a very interesting question because, okay, people ask that, and the only way you can do it is count it. So when I was in college, my college textbook had some selected, a few different species of birds, how many feathers they had, and I think barred owls were around 8,000. Well, I think it was last year, there was somebody out in Oregon that checked a great horned owl. So this was a female who was just going into breeding season. She died from a virus that she acquired from pigeons. And she had 12,259 feathers. And I have no idea how many feathers small owls have because I don't think anybody's counted.
12,259 feathers. I will remember that number. That's amazing that someone actually counted it.
I know. Don't sneeze when you're counting feathers.
Especially the small ones. I cannot believe that. Okay, question number 35, Terry Green. I recently read that eyes do not move in the socket. That is why they move their head in various directions to be able to see. Is that accurate?
Yes, owl eyes are a couple of things about owl eyes. They're very different than ours. Ours are round like a marble. You put them on a table and they'll just roll all over the place. Owl eyes and all bird eyes have a ring of bones in them called the sclerotic ring. But in owls, those sclerotic rings tend to be very pronounced. So especially in a great horned owl, they're very substantial and they pinch the eyes into a tube. So what you see is like a pop can laying on side with, and you're seeing kind of a small bulge at the end. That's the colored part of the eye that you see. And then there's kind of a big bulge on the back where the retina is. So they're a different shape, and that doesn't help them move much in their socket. And they're also enormous. So if you take, this is bizarre, and I've done it, if you take the brain out of a great horned owl and you set it next to one eyeball, the one eyeball is actually a little bit bigger than the brain. So the eyeballs are taking up an immense amount of the skull. So between the size and the shape, there's not much room for musculature. Somebody actually did a study, which I found kind of gross, where they fixed an owl's head perfectly still. And I don't remember what they did with the eyes, but they checked to see if they could move. And I think it was a great horned owl. And they found that the eye could actually move about half a degree, which is functionally not moving. I've never seen any of our birds look like their eyes are moving. So there's multiple reasons. So yes, owls have very mobile necks. But if you look, most other birds do also. And that's because most birds have an oil gland up at the top of their tail where their tail attaches to the body. And they all have to be able to reach down behind to get at that and smear that oil all over their entire body. So most birds actually have a wide range of neck motion, a lot like owls do. It just looks dramatic in owls because you don't see the skinny neck because they have big feathers that stick out, make it look like they don't really have a neck, but they actually have a very long neck. They've got 14 cervical vertebrae. We only have 7. Even giraffes only have 7. But owls have 14, and I suspect most other birds do, but I don't know for sure.
Thank you. And Osprey Mama sends a question. I'm sorry I don't understand it at the moment. Maybe it's just me, but it's something about 2 female, one male, both females laid eggs. Is that common? I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Maybe Nicole can rephrase the question. Thank you very much. So we'll come back to that. Question number 37.
I know what you're talking about.
Oh, you know. Oh, you see, you're smart. Go ahead.
This is the owl cam, the great horned owl cam at the Desert Research Institute in Nevada, over by Reno. And there are 2 females that have nested about 8 inches from each other with the same male feeding both of them. So we have an instance of polygamy going on in great horned owls. And as far as I'm aware, it's the first documented instance of polygamy in great horned owls. It's been documented in other species, but I don't think they're normally that close together. And this has been just such a strange cam. I mean, these birds aren't following any of the rules, and all kinds of weird things are going on. So when Gina's eggs hatched, she laid first. Then Sienna, the stimulus was so strong to feed young that she left her own eggs and wanted to feed the babies here, and they kind of fought for who's taking care of the babies, and then they were kind of both over there and then kind of bickering back and forth because female great horned owls are really bossy and the males are kind of submissive. We'll get 2 females together, and of course you're going to have bickering because they are bossy. And now one of the young ones has fallen off the ledge at about 4 weeks of age, so one of the moms is hanging out there. The other one, Gina, is up with the baby still up on the ledge on the side of the building. But now she's doing weird things too. It's like she's reverting to being a chick, and she'll give the owlet food or the owlet takes food and then she takes it away, like sibling rivalry. So I kind of suspect it's probably mother-daughter, and Gina is probably the daughter. And this is just total conjecture. But why would 2 females who are fiercely territorial, why would they tolerate each other's presence? And the only thing I can think of is either sisters or mother-daughter. And especially with Gina's behavior, the way she's acting with this other owlet, almost kind of being a rival to it for food, makes me think she's a young bird. So maybe Sienna's the mom and Gina's the baby. But this is just, it's so weird.
Well, thank you for explaining that question. Very good. That's amazing. And here, Sue White is asking, do owls hear like bats?
Owls do not hear like bats. So bats are using basically a kind of sonar. They're making a sound, very high-pitched sound that we can't hear, which is good because it's extremely loud. And they're listening for the echoes, and that's how they're detecting what's around them. Owls are just listening. They're not making a sound and listening for an echo. So it's totally different than how bats navigate.
Right, and I think bats are very unique in that, aren't they? So, yeah, Nicole comes up with an interesting question. We again discussed yesterday, how many different vocalization sounds does a great horned owl have?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit subjective as to how many. They have three basic types of vocalizations. They have hoots, they have chitters, and they have squawks. So within the hoots, you have the regular territorial hoot, which is what everybody thinks of. You have an emphatic hoot when they get really upset about something. You have staccato hoots when they're really excited. And then there can be greeting hoots or when they're ready to copulate that are lower. So that's kind of the main types of hoots. And chitters are a graded vocalization, so there's not distinct differences. It's just gradual changes from one to the other. So it can be quiet and conversational. It can be annoyed. It can be really annoyed, really ticked off, or it can be kind of the copulation squeal that the male does is kind of like a chitter also. And then they do these weird squawking sounds, which what people are most familiar with are the juvenile begging calls that they do. But the female can also do an alarm call, kind of a whack, whack. Or sometimes it's 3 to 4 notes, and it doesn't seem to be an alarm. Sometimes it's just a single squawk. Sometimes it's a single squawk interspersed with emphatic hoots. So the squawks are really complicated, and I think an individual vocalization might mean more than one thing. That I haven't figured out yet. So there's a wide variety. And then, of course, they hiss and they clack their bills like most other owls do also, which those are technically non-vocal communication, but it's still communication.
So fascinating. And question number 39, Nature Lover, is the Eurasian owl one of the most powerful raptors?
The Eurasian eagle owl is probably not one of the most powerful raptors. They can kill a roe deer, which is kind of like a very, very, kind of maybe a fawn size for those of us in North America that are used to white-tailed deer. So they can kill some really big things. But when it comes to grip strength and just ferocity, great horned owls are much more than Eurasian eagle owls, much tougher customers.
And now the same about vocalization or similar, that's Proud Cat Mama asking, how far can the call of great horned owl be heard? Well, that depends probably on the transmission and the receiving side. That would be my answer.
Yep.
But anyway.
So it depends on how loud they're calling. It depends on the air. So some nights the sounds transmit much better and farther than other nights. And then, you know, how good your hearing is, the hearing of the receiver. So me personally here, typically I can hear owls, great horned owls, half a mile away quite easily. But I have heard them just over a mile away one night when the air was just so.
Yeah, that's a great question. And now Maxine Wirth. Hi, Maxine. So, what type of owls live in Tucson, Arizona? I hear owl sounds in my near my home, but I don't know what type of owls they are. Everybody's loving the show, and Maxine wants to thank Carla. Thank you for that. So that's good.
Thanks. I'm glad people are liking it because, as you can tell, I like to talk about owls. So
let's not know we didn't know. Fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah, Tucson is a great place for owling because there's all kinds of owl species there. It's one of the most diverse places for owls in the United States. So I'm probably not even going to be able to tell you all the different species you would have there. You would definitely have barn owls. You would definitely have great horned owls. There should be spotted owls within the area. I mean, the greater area of that part of Arizona. Elf owls. Ferruginous pygmy owls are very, very rare. Let me see, what else? I think there might, I'm trying to think if there's, I don't know if long-eareds and short-eareds are down there. Burrowing owls. I'm trying to think. One of my staff is actually down by Tucson right now looking at owls. And we just got a salvage permit for Arizona. At the International Owl Center, we're trying to have a collection of all the different mounted owl species, of all the species that occur in North America. We've got 9 of the species right now, and most of what we're missing could come from Arizona still. So she should come back with some specimens for us from rehabilitators or ones that have been found dead. Trying to think what other species, but there's quite a diversity of species down there. I mean, it's an excellent place to look for owls. People go to Arizona to go owling, in the Chiricahua Mountains especially.
Very good. And let me see, where do we have the next question? Oh, this is an interesting one about DDT. Of course, you know, remember the beginning of the 60s. Did DDT play any role in the reproduction of owls, just as they did with eagles?
I have not heard much about DDT in relation to owls. It may have for some species, but I don't think it was the big deal that it was for peregrine falcons, bald eagles, and things like that.
Well, that's it. That's interesting. Okay, and Nicole with question number 43. Can you believe it? 43. This is amazing. Has there been a study on owls' sense of smell?
I don't know if anybody has studied it. They typically say owls don't have any sense of smell because great horned owls eat skunk, so they figure they can't smell anything. But if smell and taste are linked, which, I mean, normally they are in vertebrates, then I would think they must have some sense of smell, because our birds certainly have food preferences. You know, they don't like the taste of this one and they don't like the taste of that, but they like the taste of that. So they definitely have taste preferences. But that being said, I've never seen an owl react to a smell. So, but I don't know of any studies on.
Well, let me add a question for you, because I find this really interesting. We're learning so much, Carla. I remember talking to David Hancock about, you know, the new species of eagles, and David always told me, well, eagles don't have a sense of smell, but they are vulturines. So that is a mixture between an eagle and a vulture, and they are now classified as eagles. So there are eagles indeed with a good sense of smell. So my question would extend to you, looking at the complexity of species and the you know, the genetic classification. Is it possible that there are cross species between owls and maybe, I don't know, vultures? I'm just guessing now, that would possibly show some sense of smell. Are there some sort of related, you know, genuses that could indicate that?
I don't think anybody's ever really, and I don't know for sure, but I don't think owls have ever been classed anywhere near vultures. I can't think of any owls that would be, I mean, the Tytos, the barn owls and their relatives, are very different from the other ones. And I would think if anybody's got it, it's probably going to be somewhere in that department, because they have more of a vulture-like skull. Their skull is kind of long and sloping, whereas the other ones are kind of just fat with a beak that sticks out.
Yeah, I mean, these are fascinating. Nicole is coming with another question. Do owls have a good depth perception?
Okay, well, that's why you always see owls doing this kind of thing. And that's to help with their triangulation and depth perception and figure out how far away things are. So this is what they do to help with that. And some owls do it a lot. And you'll see barn owls, they kind of do the whole body wiggles back and forth when they're looking at it. So they're all a little bit different, but they all have this kind of thing going on to help with depth perception. Vision-wise, up close, they're all farsighted. They don't see very well up close. So if they're standing on their food and they want to see it better, they stretch up as tall as they can. So it's like if you're reading your newspaper and you don't have your glasses on and you're holding it out here, that's how owls see.
Well, Carla, we've keeping you very busy. I think what we should do now is we should jump to the second part. So I hope you still have a lot of energy, because let's do the quiz now. So I'm just going to blend in the dial-in number now. So I hope you can see it. It seems to be flashing a bit. I don't understand why. There must be something wrong. One second, I'm going to try that again. Maybe there's something. Okay, sorry about that. That must be some error, but the number that you see is 425-223-4960. I unfortunately cannot stabilize it, and I don't know why it's doing that. So just excuse me. That's 425-223-4960. Just notify the number, please. Note down the number. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over to our quiz show. So that's the number to dial in. We're going to accept 3 callers. And I'm going to stop this stupid blinking. I don't know what's going on, but that's not me. Okay, so just note the number again, 425-223-4960. And I'll just take the number out and just put it in the chat, please. Okay, so that everybody can see the number, so I can just get rid of this annoying, annoying error here. So Carla, please, I'm just going to switch over my audio so I don't make the same mistake again. Hopefully we don't have any echoes now. So I just switched over the audio to the quiz. Carla, could you please come up with a question now and see if this works? Some question that can you think of a question? I mean, I know immediately a question. We were talking about well, I want to give you a hint, but you had three questions or so, just a question for our listener that they should answer. So it's up to you. I'm sure you have a million questions.
Oh, well, here's one. I mean, if you look at the back of my shirt, if I turn around here, our goal is to make the world a better place for owls.
Yes.
Kind of our take-home message at the Owl Center. So name at least one thing that you can do to help owls.
Name at least one thing that you can do to help owls. So please dial in. The number is 425-223-4960. That is 425-223-4960. Jenny put it in the chat. And yeah, we'll be waiting for your call, and hopefully this works. We can do it technically. Oh, there's an echo now, but that's unfortunately I cannot avoid the echo, Jenny. I hope the echo is not too bad. I'm going to at least silence myself until the call comes in. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Hello? Hello.
Hello.
Hello. With whom am I speaking, please?
It's Kathleen Mayforo. I'm actually KMS Banner, which is all initials of my children and my name.
Okay. So yeah. Sorry. Can you just speak a little bit louder? I could hardly hear you. Come again, please.
It's Kathy.
Kathy.
Santoro.
Hi, Kathy. Yes. Got it.
Hi.
So, Kathy, did you hear the question? Hi. So, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Connecticut.
Connecticut. Well, welcome to our show. Wonderful to have you here. So, you have the possibility to win a beautiful eagle picture. So, did you hear Carla's question? What can we do to help? So, her question was, what is one thing that we can do to help owls? That was the question.
Oh. Not put out mouse poison, not to use poison.
Yes, so she says not to put out poison, mouse poison and so on. Yes, Carla is putting thumbs up. You've got it. You've got it. It was Kathy, right? Just to
yes.
Yes, Kathy, that is wonderful. Kathy, please do me a favor. So Kathy from Connecticut, so we get your details. Please just make sure you send an email to sassemedia@gmail.com so we note down your that we have your email details so we can send you a picture. What we're going to do at the end, we're going to listen to 2 more questions, and then we will run the Wheel of Fortune and see which picture you have won. So you did very well. Thank you, Kathy, for joining.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Fine. Bye. Okay, that was Kathy. I'm not sure, Carla, if you could actually hear. Probably not. But okay, not. Okay, hang on. Here comes another one. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. With whom am I speaking, please?
This is Alatrac Tracy.
Alatrac Tracy, you've been very busy tonight asking questions. Thank you so much. Where are you calling from?
I am in Alabama.
Alabama. Where in Alabama?
I am in Hoover, Alabama. It's a suburb of Birmingham.
Birmingham, yes, Birmingham, Hoover, Alabama. Thank you so much. Well, it's wonderful to have you on the show. So I'm going to, I'll probably have to ask Carla now to ask a second question. So it's going to, you're really going to be put a little bit on the spot. So don't worry, that's
Oh
live.
boy,
So
that's
Carla,
the way it
do you
worked
mind
the last
asking?
time I got through.
Okay, that's great. Carla, could you please ask a question, a second question?
Okay, I'll ask this one because this one is one of my one of the things I talk about a lot and did talk about a lot. Can an owl start with its head in the front? Can all owls start with their head in the front, turn it to the side, to the back, and to the other side? So 270 from the front. Can all owls turn their heads 270 degrees?
Okay, well, I'm sure you know the answer to this because we've been discussing it tonight. So Carla's question is very clear. Can an owl, or can all owls, turn their heads 270 degrees? That's what we learn in literature. What is it? It's either a yes or a no. Can all owls turn their heads 270 degrees? So look in front, look to the side, 180 degrees back, and then go even further. What do you
No.
think? No is the answer. You got it. Very well, you deserve it. You absolutely deserve it. Well done. So you're going to...
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're most welcome. It's wonderful to have you on the show. And thank you so much for your enthusiasm. Thank you also for all your questions that you put in. That's very well noted. So please, let's just make sure we have your details and your email. So send an email to sassemedia@gmail.com or either that one or the other email address. But anyway, one of them. They'll put the correct email in the chat anyway. So thanks so much for being on our show and have a nice weekend. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Great show.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Okay, so we'll have one more caller, please. One more caller. We're doing 5. And here we go. Let's see who this is. Hello?
Hello.
Hello, with whom am I speaking, please?
You are speaking to Glenn Hazel Woody again, Dr. Sasse.
Glenn Hazel Woody.
Show.
I know you. Glenn Hazel Woody, I know your name very well. You've been also very good tonight with all your questions. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm, your passion, and taking part. So from where are you calling?
From outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Wow, we got good nests there. I mean, there's a lot going on with eagle nests, isn't that? So
yes,
that's a very
we do,
interesting
sir.
area.
Our rivers have come back.
Your rivers have come back. Very good. So I'm going to put you on the spot now because Carla is going to ask a question, which I will then convey to you. No, that's okay.
Thank you.
That's okay. So Carla, please go ahead.
Okay. This one was snuck in there if you were paying attention. What is the smallest owl in the world?
Oh, here we go. There was a hint about this. What is the smallest owl in the world? Did you actually note that? It was mentioned briefly tonight. What is the smallest owl in the world?
The pygmy?
She says the pygmy.
Close, but not quite.
You're close, but not quite. There was another one. It had a fairy tale name, if I remember correctly.
The elf.
The elf. Yes, you got it.
Yes, I'm sorry.
You got it.
I was going to say pygmy. I was going to say pygmy elf. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You did very well.
Okay.
That is marvelous. Marvelous. You paid attention to the elf. All absolutely correct. So you got thumbs up from Carla. Well, thank you so much for participating. So no more callers, please. And
thank you.
We'll have a nice weekend in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And do remember, just send an email to us so we have we get your details. And what we're going to do now. Thank you, sir. You're most welcome. Thank you. Okay, fine. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, that's good. I'm just going to switch over now. So that should get rid of the echo now. So Carla, what we're going to do now is we're going to, I'm just going to prepare this. Just give me a second. And hopefully I get this correct now. Let's see. See if I can do this. No, that's the wrong screen. That's the wrong screencast. Here we go. That's the correct screen. So Carla, what you should be seeing now is a wheel with an eagle. Good. So I'm going to start spinning it right now. And all you need to do is at some point just shout stop. So that's for number 1. Okay, oh, that's a beautiful one. That's image number 13. Image number 13 for our first caller. That's what you win. That was, by the way, an image that I took that won a prize at an Eagle Festival. That's a beautiful eagle landing with a midshipman in its foot. So there you go, in full light. So congratulations. So we're going to spin now for the second picture. So it's your turn again to say stop at some time. There you go. Oh, this is a very nice one. That's a floating eagle in Harrison Mills in the fog. So congratulations to our second winner. And we spin it again. That was image number 11 for the second. And we go again. Yes. Oh, here you go. That's a detail of a talon that you win. My goodness, very nice. So that's image number 25 for the third. Well, congratulations to all our winners. Thank you so much for participating. So I'm just going to put Carla back on there. There's Carla. Well, Carla, you know, really, it's been absolutely wonderful. You have been so patient. You've been incredibly educational. I think we've all learned so much. So I would like to thank you so much for taking the time. And I also want to thank my team that has put so much work into organizing this. So thank you to all of you, so my great team. And thank you, Carla, for participating. And really, I hope I meet you one day in person. It would be wonderful to really meet you in person and see what you have in Houston, Minnesota, which is incredible.
Minnesota.
Yes, Minnesota. That's right. It's Minnesota. That's it. I got it. I learned something today.
This has been wonderfully fun. I love talking to owl, answering owl questions.
Well, thank you so much. It's been incredibly educational. And so I wish you a wonderful weekend. And Carla, well, my team will be in contact with you. You'll also get some images from us as a thank you. And really, thanks for all the time. And it's wonderful to see dedicated, people like you, dedicated in education of raptors. Really wonderful. And have a very nice weekend. And thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll quickly switch over. Let me just do this 1 second. And yes, so I want to wish you all a wonderful evening and a wonderful weekend. Thank you for being with us. So next Friday, we'll be back again and we have a new live guest. I think it's also from a Raptor Center as far as I remember, Nicole, so it's going to be exciting again. So don't forget, next Wednesday, we're going to continue again with Eagle and Raptor news. It's about 30 to 40 minutes. And then we'll see you in a week's time. So goodbye and have a wonderful weekend. And thank you so much for participating.